Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep, uncompromising dive into the actual biological mechanisms of stress, sleep, and nervous system regulation. We hear it all the time, right? Just take a deep breath to calm down, or, try to relax before bed. But today, we're completely bypassing that kind of superficial advice. We want to uncover the actual neurobiology at play here. We're going to look at exactly how your brain, your vagus nerve, and even the literal molecular levels of carbon dioxide in your blood interacts to either keep you wide awake and panicked or drop you into a state of profound restorative rest. So let's dive into this by shattering a pretty massive misconception right out of the gate. The idea that relaxation is universally calming, it's actually biologically false. For a lot of people, taking a deep breath and trying to wind down doesn't lead to sleep. It literally leads to a full-blown panic attack. Now, why on earth does that happen? Well, it's a documented clinical phenomenon, and it's called relaxation-induced anxiety, or RIA. And this isn't some rare edge case. For a huge portion of the population, some studies suggest up to 53%, the very act of attempting to relax triggers sudden, acute distress. So listen, if you've ever laid in bed trying to meditate or do some deep breathing, only to find your heart racing faster and your mind just spinning completely out of control, you are not doing it wrong. You're experiencing RIA. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding why the brain does this. It really comes down to something called negative contrast sensitivity. When you're dealing with chronic anxiety, your brain basically uses worry as an emotional shield. You're perpetually braced for impact. So when you suddenly relax, you drop that shield. Your hypervigilant brain perceives this sudden drop in tension not as peace, but as extreme vulnerability. It literally thinks, we are unprotected, and instantly fires up the sympathetic nervous system. It basically hits you with a massive spike of panic just to get you back to a quote-unquote safe state of worry. Thanks, brain.
Section 1. The Vagal Superhighway, Anatomy of the Autonomic Nervous System. To really understand what's happening beneath that psychological surface, we have to look at the actual biological machinery connecting your mind and body, the vagus nerve.
80%, that is a massive number. 80% of your vagus nerve fibers are afferent. That means they act as a biological superhighway, sending sensory data from your visceral organs, your gut, your heart, your lungs, straight up to your brain. Not the other way around. Your brain is constantly, continuously listening to your body to decide if you're safe enough to sleep or if you need to stay awake and defend yourself. This brilliantly illustrates the polyvagal theory, which breaks the vagus nerve down into two distinct anatomical pathways. On one side, we have the ventral vagal complex. This innervates organs above the diaphragm, like your heart and lungs. This is your system for safety, for social engagement, and for calm. On the flip side is the dorsal vagal complex, extending below the diaphragm down to your gut. This handles digestion, sure, but under extreme threat, it drives the freeze or shutdown response. So when we want to optimize sleep, we need to actively and purposefully stimulate that ventral pathway. Section 2. The carbon dioxide alarm, the mechanics of breath and panic. Let's explore exactly what happens on a molecular level when this system misfires, specifically regarding a very misunderstood molecule, carbon dioxide.
We usually think of oxygen as the good guy and CO2 as the bad waste product, right? But that's entirely wrong when it comes to nervous system regulation. This cycle shows exactly how panic and insomnia actually sustain themselves. When you're stressed, you start breathing rapidly and shallowly. You hyperventilate. This blows off way too much CO2, dropping your blood CO2 levels below 35 millimeters of mercury, which is a state called hypocarbia. And here's the crazy paradox. Low CO2 causes the blood vessels in your brain to severely constrict. Even though you are breathing fast, you are literally starving your brain of oxygen. This triggers profound dizziness, air hunger, and just massive, massive panic.
To make matters worse, the adrenaline pumping through your body from that initial fear actually lowers your tolerance for CO2 by about 30%. Normally, CO2 is your body's natural alarm bell, telling you to take a breath. Adrenaline turns that normal alarm bell into a blaring air raid siren. You feel suffocated, so you breathe faster, which lowers CO2 even more, which constricts your blood vessels even more. It's this perfect, vicious, biological negative feedback loop of panic that will absolutely destroy your ability to sleep. Section 3, hacking the autonomic interface, respiration as the control panel. We need to look at how we fix this, because respiration is our direct, conscious interface to this involuntary system. It turns out most of us have probably been breathing wrong our entire lives. Here is the exact mechanism to hack the system. It's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, or RSA. When you inhale, you temporarily suppress the vagal brake, and your heart rate naturally accelerates. But when you exhale, you re-engage that vagal brake. Your body dumps acetylcholine right onto your heart's pacemaker, immediately slowing your heart rate down. Your breath is quite literally the steering wheel and the brake pedal for your entire nervous system. What's truly amazing is what happens when you intentionally extend that exhale. Deep inside your lung tissue are these slowly adapting pulmonary stretch receptors. When you mechanically stretch your lungs and release the air slowly, these receptors fire a signal straight up the vagus nerve to a hub in your brainstem called the nucleus tractus solitarius. This triggers the Brewer-Herring reflex. Guys, it is a literal biological safety signal that suppresses the locus coeruleus, which is the alarm center of your brain responsible for hyperarousal and panic. We literally see the proof of this in our brainwaves. When we monitor the brain, its ability to listen to the heart is significantly elevated during the exhale. Not only that, but this extended exhale triggers an anti-inflammatory pathway. It actively signals your immune cells to stop releasing inflammatory markers via alpha-7 nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. You are literally using your breath to fight systemic inflammation and calm your brain at the exact same time. It's incredible. Section 4. Precision Breathing Protocols, the Clinical Toolkit. Now that we understand the deep molecular mechanics, let's explore the highly actionable researched protocols. We're moving way beyond just breathe into a real clinical toolkit because different biological goals require completely different breathing architectures. Box breathing gives you a highly structured, even rhythm that's great for focus. The 4-7-8 method relies heavily on that extended exhale we just talked about to engage the vagal brake for sleep. The Buteyko method focuses on shallow breathing and holds to specifically rebuild your tolerance to CO2. But there is one protocol that has recently just blown up in the clinical literature. Consider this incredible finding from a landmark 2023 study published by Stanford researchers in the journal Cell. They found that just 5 minutes of daily cyclic sighing actively outperformed passive mindfulness meditation for improving positive mood and reducing physiological arousal. Just think about how wild that is for a second. Actively controlling your respiratory rate is objectively superior for acute stress management than just sitting there and observing your thoughts. So, how exactly do you do it? The mechanics are incredibly precise. Step 1, you take a normal inhale through the nose. Step 2, right before you exhale, you take a short, sharp top-up sniff. That double inhale completely inflates the alveoli. Those are the tiny air sacs in your lungs that actually tend to collapse when you're stressed out. And then step 3 is a long, slow exhale through the mouth, which maximizes that vagal brake we mapped out earlier. Another totally fascinating protocol is alternate nostril breathing. And no, this isn't just ancient tradition. It maps directly to hard neurobiology. Humans have a natural nasal cycle, where dominance shifts between the left and right nostrils roughly every 1 hour and 28 minutes. Airflow through the left nostril is linked to the parasympathetic, creative right hemisphere of the brain. The right nostril links to the analytical, sympathetic left hemisphere. By consciously directing the airflow back and forth, you physically force equilibrium across your entire nervous system. And just to show you how ridiculously measurable all of this is, 0.93. In a classic physiological study, researchers used beta blockers to isolate parasympathetic activity. They found that when you properly factor in a person's breathing rate and the volume of air they move, the mathematical correlation between their respiratory sinus arrhythmia and their actual parasympathetic control is a staggering 0.93. Your breath rate is practically a direct real-time readout of your nervous system's capacity to relax. Which brings us to our final question. You're no longer in the dark about how this works. You know about the vagal superhighway, the carbon dioxide alarm, the literal stretch receptors in your lungs, and the exact protocols to manipulate them. Knowing all of this, how are you going to take conscious control tonight? You don't have to be a passive victim of stress or insomnia anymore. You hold the exact biological key to shift your state, command your nervous system, and finally optimize your rest. Use it. But it does make you wonder, if breath is just one lever in the human operating system, what other hidden controls are waiting to be unlocked?